Okay, everyone, I don't want to hold all of you up. I'm sure you are all busy individuals, so we're going to go ahead and get this started. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Takinia, the Grants Director for the Arts and Humanities Council. I'm here with my fabulous staff, Karen, who is our Grants Manager, Ana Alicia, who's our Assistant Grants Manager, and Dorothea, who recently joined the team as our new coordinator. So we are happy that you have decided to attend a webinar before the deadline. That is the smartest thing to do to ensure that you submit the most competitive application as possible. Okay, oh, thank you. Ana Alicia, I seem to be having a hard time moving the slides. Did you move that or was that me?
That was all you.
Huh. It took a minute. Okay, no worries. So we always begin our public meetings with a land acknowledgement. The Arts and Humanities Council of Montgomery County acknowledges that we are in Montgomery County, Maryland, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Alcohonic, the Assateague, the Piscataway, the Pocomoke, the Shawnee, and the Naze-Wawash people. All right, so here's what we're going to cover today. I will provide a brief discussion for why the Arts and Humanities Council exists and our role in the community. We will go over the process for how to apply for a Wheaton grant. I'll go over the guidelines, which are very important that you understand the guidelines. I always instruct applicants to read the guidelines more than once because there's a lot of information in there. We'll also discuss the required application materials. My colleague, Ana Alicia, will give you a tutorial for how to navigate the SM Apply Grants portal. That is where you will submit your applications, your work samples, your supplementary materials. And I'll provide some general grant writing tips to ensure that you submit the strongest proposal as possible. We'll also leave some time at the end of this session for questions. Know that I will go through the full presentation with my colleague, Ana Alicia. I'm not going to stop to answer questions, but know that you can enter whatever questions you have in the chat box. So if you think of something while I'm talking, just enter it in the chat. That's not a problem, and the question will be answered. Also remember that if this webinar comes to a close and you think of a question after, there's nothing wrong with that. You can always reach out to staff directly after the webinar as well. All right, so here's the mission and the vision for the Arts and Humanities Council. I'm not going to read it verbatim, but know that we exist as a nonprofit that has been designated by the county to financially support our vibrant cultural sector, specifically in Montgomery County. So we use public funds from the Montgomery County government and we redistribute those funds to eligible applicants. Keep in mind that our funding is supposed to stay in the county and that directly impacts eligibility for all applicants. We are here to bolster our local cultural sector specifically. Equity and inclusion is of prime importance for all of our funding opportunities. So please read this statement carefully. It's in all of our guidelines for every funding opportunity. And it really is the crux of our funding opportunities. It's the central goal. It's the core of our funding. We want you to keep in mind that we are cognizant of the fact that there are certain communities that have been historically underserved by public funding, and we encourage those communities to apply. We also want applicants to keep in mind that you should think about those communities that have not been reached by a number of cultural organizations or individual artists and scholars. So that means that when you're thinking about your target audience, think to yourself, who has been left out of this equation? Who could I directly serve that has been overlooked historically? Also, for organizations and groups, we want you to look internally at your own organizational makeup and see where there may be places where you can diversify internally. And I'll discuss that in more depth as we discuss the evaluative criteria later on in this webinar. The ADA compliance statement is also in all of our guidelines as well. There are two separate statements on these slides because, there's a lot of language here and, it would be too much to include it in one slide, but know that it's interrelated with equity and inclusion. It's not separate. We want to ensure that all the projects we fund are accessible. Okay, that's really important to keep in mind. Even if you're doing a virtual project, please think of ways to make sure that your virtual project is accessible to differently abled individuals. Okay, and if you have concerns about how to approach this, if this is new territory for you, when you go to our guidelines, you'll see that there's an embedded hyperlink. And when you click on that hyperlink, there is a document that pops up. It's a pretty in-depth document that provides guidance for the various different ways applicants can approach accessibility with their offerings to the community. So here's an overview for the process. So the application deadline, which is coming up next month, is really important. It's a non-negotiable deadline. So do keep that in mind. So we cannot change the deadline. If you happen to miss the deadline and you send an email to staff or call the next day, unfortunately, we cannot help you out. The deadline is set in stone. Once the deadline passes, staff will review the application to ensure that your application is eligible, to ensure that the applicant meets all of our requirements for eligibility that are detailed in the guidelines. Now, know that at this point, this isn't the time to alter your document. So that's why it's really important to contact staff before the deadline with any questions that you may have, because at this point, the application needs to stand on its own. Now, when we determine that applicants are eligible, we then forward only the eligible applicants to our panel. So the council works really hard to ensure that we assemble a diverse collective of professionals to review all eligible applications, and diversity in every sense of the word. So we make sure that the panelists have a strong understanding of the Arts and Humanities Council from a multidisciplinary perspective. That means that they'll understand all the different genres: performing arts, visual arts, literary arts, humanities. We make sure that they have a strong understanding of nonprofit management, particularly for those applicants that are applying as organizations with 501c3 status, or groups that may not have 501c3 status but are still operating as a nonprofit. So that means that the panel will understand community outreach, programming, financial management, organizational capacity, all that's entailed that's necessary to bring a project into fruition. The panel is also diverse in terms of how they self-identify, so diverse in terms of race and ethnicity, the gender spectrum, the sexuality spectrum, age. We ensure this because we want to make sure that ideally we avoid any unconscious bias as applicants, as panelists review the proposals submitted by applicants. The panel meeting is a public meeting. So that means that if your proposal is eligible, when the panel meets, we highly encourage you to attend. Panel meetings will be done over Zoom because we're still sadly in a pandemic and we want to ensure safety for all attendees. So it will be a virtual panel. And when we know the date of the panel, we will let all applicants know. The date has not been confirmed yet, but once the date is confirmed, we will let all applicants know so you can mark your calendars and try your best to attend. It's a wonderful learning opportunity and it's rare. There are plenty of grant makers who do closed panel meetings, so we highly encourage you to attend. And ideally, if you have the time, stay and listen to the full meeting so you can hear the discussion of other projects as well, so that you can learn how to bolster your own project in the future. So when the panel meeting has ended, staff will take all the feedback from the panel and pass it on to our grants committee. The grants committee will review the panel's assessment, provide their own feedback, and then the grants committee will send their feedback with the panel feedback to the board of directors. The board has the final say on who receives an award and if there are any declines. Once the board has made their final determination, we make a public announcement of who has received a grant or if sadly you've been declined. Know that if you've been declined, please do not, lose hope. We always encourage people to reapply if they've been declined. And sometimes what happens, which can be normal, sometimes first-time attendees, if you're brand new to grant writing, sometimes those are the applicants that are declined if there is a decline, but please don't lose hope. Know that staff is happy to provide feedback appointments on your proposals if you are declined. And even if you receive an award, it's really smart to check in with staff and get a feedback appointment just to make sure that you fully understand the panel's recommendations. All right, so let's look at the guidelines. So this funding opportunity exists to support Wheaton specifically. It is very geographically specific. And it's designed this way because the council has deemed Wheaton as a locale that has been historically underinvested. And it really is a fascinating geographic location in that there's a lot going on. There's a lot of ethnic diversity. There's a lot of creativity going on. So know that when you are designing your project, you need to be clear about how this project will benefit Wheaton specifically, even if you're doing a virtual project or a hybrid project that's part virtual, part in person, you still need to make the case clear for how this will benefit Wheaton specifically. All right, so in terms of parameters, we cannot provide a grant that's less than 1,000, and our grants for this category are capped at 10,000. You could ask for a grant somewhere in between these numbers, but know that your request should be no lower than 1,000 and no more than 10,000. So this is the deadline, folks. Please keep it in mind. Again, it's non-negotiable. Do what you need to do to have it memorized, set your alarms, because on October 16th, we can't help you out. And also keep in mind too, that on October 15th, staff will be working standard work hours. So that means that, we will stop working at 5:30 on October 15th. So that means that if you have a question at 10 o'clock at night on October 15th, we can't help you out. So that's why we highly encourage you to start your application early. If you can start it today, directly after this webinar, you should do it. The earlier you start, the better, because you want to make sure that you have ample time to ask us as many questions as you need. And also you want to make sure that you don't run into any tech issues that, could happen. Let's say your computer crashes on October 15th. That's bad. We can't help you out, right? So if you're having any difficulty with SM Apply, you want to contact us as soon as possible before the deadline. And Annalicia will mention this as well when she goes over SM Apply, but know that you can hit the submit button. And if you hit the submit button before the deadline, and then you realize, oh my gosh, I totally forgot to upload that artist bio, it's okay. You can still get back into the portal, back into your application and revise it. So please do not fear the submit button. Please do not wait until 11:58 on October 15th to hit the submit button. It's heartbreaking when applicants do that, and then they call us the next day crying because they missed the deadline. Don't do that to yourself, because you really don't need to. Just hit that submit button. And if you do it early and you realize you still want to work on your application, that's not a problem. You can get back in there. All right, so let's go over eligibility. So this opportunity is available for both individuals and also groups that may not have 501c3 status and organizations that have 501c3 status. So for individuals, please keep in mind that you must reside in Montgomery County, right? Because our funding needs to stay in the county. So if you reside in Virginia, or if you reside in, let's say, PG County, you're not eligible. You have to reside in the Montgomery County for at least 12 months prior to the deadline. And please ensure that you will also remain in Montgomery County for the duration of the period of support, right? So, keep in mind that if you're residing in Montgomery County, you submit a great application, you get an award, and then you decide next year, you know, in August that you want to move out of state or move out of the county, and your project is supposed to occur, you know, we may have to pull the grant. So do keep in mind that when you look at the period of support, you want to ensure that you'll still be in Montgomery County during the period of support. You must be at least 21 years of age. We can't, unfortunately, support full-time students, so you shouldn't be a full-time student. And you need to be able to provide us with a social security number or an ITIN prior to undertaking the grant activities. This has to do with dispersing the funds to you. All right, so if you are someone who's reapplying, make sure that you have met any outstanding requirements for any grants that you've previously received from the Arts and Humanities Council. And this is important, if you are an individual applying, you have to have a partner that is an organization that is working with you on the project. So for individuals, and again, this is specifically for individuals, keep this in mind, you can partner with an organization that is nonprofit or for-profit. You have some flexibility there. And the budget, you don't really have to worry about the budget of your partner organization. Again, this is just for individuals who are applying for a grant. Now, it's important to remember that this needs to be a meaningful collaboration. I don't encourage individuals to like rush and just grab any venue and you know, what you don't want the panel to think is that you've got a flimsy partnership. So let me give you an example of something that doesn't sound strong. Let's say you're a musician and you play folk music and you found a restaurant in Wheaton that will let you perform in the restaurant for one random evening so that you can perform your folk music. That's not really an in-depth collaboration, okay? That's just a venue that's letting you perform there for one night. We're talking about a meaningful project, a meaningful collaboration where the partner organization can really help you enhance your artistic or humanities offerings, or importantly, can help you reach a specific target demographic. So let me give you another hypothetical. So let's say you are a folk musician who's developed an interest in traditional Colombian folk music. And you look at the census data for Wheaton and you see, oh, Wheaton has a very large Latinx community, but you're not really sure how to reach this community. So you're doing some research and you see, oh, look at that. This Colombian nonprofit, you know, looks like they have an in-depth relationship with the target community I'm trying to reach. So you approach this organization. It's a nonprofit that exists to serve Colombian youth. And you think to yourself, oh, okay, well, you know, maybe I should partner with them. That's a meaningful collaboration. You provide a statement saying, you know, this working relationship with this organization will allow me as an applicant to directly target Colombian youth to provide a series of educational workshops about the history of Colombian folk music to a demographic that has not been reached by a number of local arts organizations. Again, this is all a hypothetical, but that's more of a meaningful partnership than Joe's Barbecue allowed me to play folk music for one night at their restaurant. So I hope that's clear. If it's not clear how to design a meaningful collaboration with a partner organization, please reach out to staff. All right, so for organizations must be located in Montgomery County for at least 12 months prior to the application deadline. So that means that if you have just designed a nonprofit and you just got your 501c3 status this month, you're not eligible because you need to have had this status for at least 12 months prior to the deadline. So that's important, keep that in mind. The organization must have a arts or humanities-based mission. We do have a budget cap for this funding opportunity, so organizations should not have a budget of over $500,000 for the most recently completed fiscal year. It needs to be under $500,000. And this is important, the organization has to be a nonprofit. We cannot fund for profits for this funding opportunity. The only time that a for-profit can be involved in a Wheaton grant is if they're partnering with an individual, but keep in mind that we're giving the funds directly to the individual, okay? So if you're applying as an organization, you have to be a nonprofit. We can't fund a for-profit organization within this funding opportunity. And a friendly reminder that if you have received grants from the Arts and Humanities Council in the recent past, please make sure that you've met all outstanding requirements for any previous grants, such as reporting. Make sure you get those all in. Okay, so for all applicants, keep in mind that we request that your project has to take place no earlier than January 1st, and it should conclude by December 31st, 2022. So you have a full year to present your project, to work on it. Keep in mind that we can't pay for any pre-award or post-award costs. So, you know, if you've started a project and you're incurring expenses now, we can't pay for those expenses. So really make sure that your project starts no earlier than January 1st. And if the project you know, is designed to go beyond December 31st, that's also a problem as well, and that we can't pay for post-award cost. Also keep in mind that, and I'll mention this briefly towards the end of the webinar, that sometimes we get money from the county late. That's not something that's really in our control. So keep that in mind, that if you are dependent on our funds to start the project, then I would suggest structuring it in such a way where it doesn't start directly on January 1st. You can start a little bit later to ensure that you have the funds in hand. Or the other way to approach it is to use our money as a reimbursement if you do not have the funds in hand directly on January 1st. So know that you can pay for costs from another source of income. And then when our money comes in, you can use our money as a reimbursement. So a reminder that the project has to take place in Wheaton, Maryland, not, you know, in another section of Maryland, specifically Wheaton. And the project must be open to the public, whether it's in person or virtual. And please remember that if it's in person, you need to follow the social distancing guidelines for in-person events required by the Montgomery County Health Department. Please keep an eye on their requirements because, again, you know, folks, we're all cognizant of the fact that we're still in a pandemic and we want everyone to be safe. All right, so you have a lot of flexibility in terms of what you offer to the community, how you design your project. This is a multidisciplinary funding opportunity. So, you know, that really means that we support practically any genre within the arts and humanities. So, you know, it can be a presentation, it can be a series of performances, it can be arts education, it can be exhibitions, lectures. You know, you have a lot of flexibility, as you can see on this list here. And this isn't an exhaustive list, you know, we can't fit everything on this slide in terms of eligible project examples. So if you have any confusion about whether or not your project is eligible, as always, reach out to staff. So here's some limitations. These are spelled out in the guidelines in detail, and this is important to remember. This is a project-based grant, so it's not designed to cover general operating expenses. You know, we can't pay for indirect costs, miscellaneous or contingency costs. Because these are public funds, we need to know exactly how the money will be used. So when you're working on your budget, please make sure that you don't list contingency or miscellaneous. That's not allowable. You need to spell out exactly how the money will be used. This money can't be used to fund public, private, or charter schools. You can't use it to build anything in terms of brick and mortar. So you can't use it for capital improvements, construction or renovation projects. So just keep all this in mind. I know I haven't read everything that's on the slide, but again, this is listed in the guidelines. And if you have any questions about this list, feel free to contact staff. We've got some other grant limitations here. Remember that we can't fund the cost of receptions, refreshments, or food. So to give you an example, if you're a visual arts applicant, let's say you are planning on using this money for a exhibition at a venue in Wheaton, and let's say you want to have an opening reception, a party with alcohol, we can't fund that. So just keep that out of your budget. We can't fund debt. The money can't be used for re-granting. We definitely can't support political advocacy or activities that support or promote the interests of any one political party or candidate. We can't fund travel outside of the United States. I mean, that should be clear given that these are local funds, they need to stay within Montgomery County. But I bring this up because sometimes the applicant gets giddy and they want to bring an artist from another locale, like from abroad, and we can't pay for visa costs, we can't pay for that. So if you want to include an artist that, like, let's say with my original project hypothetical, let's say the applicant wants to fly in a master Colombian artist who is known for specializing in folk music, all that sounds great, but you can't use our money for that person's visa cost. You would have to find another donor to fund that. And again, I know I'm not reading everything that's on this list. I wanted to highlight what's most important in terms of some of the mistakes we've seen in applications that have been submitted. But if you have any questions about what's listed here, contact staff. So some other things to keep in mind that are important. You can only submit one Wheaton application per fiscal year. Again, we can't fund grant requests that are under 1,000 or over 10,000. You can't apply for the same project in multiple funding opportunities. So we say this because there are some applicants who apply for both Wheaton grants and programming and capacity building grants. That's great, you're totally allowed to do that. Just make sure they're totally separate projects with separate budgets. And again, our funds can only be used for activities occurring no earlier than January 1st, 2022, and no later than December 31st, 2022. So here's the evaluative criteria. It's really important. It's explained in depth in our guidelines. It's important because this is a roadmap that panelists will use to evaluate your project. And what you should keep in mind here is that community impact is 35 points and project impact is 35 points. The other evaluative criteria are important, but you want to pay close attention, obviously, to these two that form the bulk of the point system. And it leads back to what I was saying at the beginning of the webinar about equity and inclusion and access being of core importance. It's a high priority for the Arts and Humanities Council that we are funding equitable projects that take into account equity and inclusion. So here's what I'll say. If you're an organization, and let's say you have a broad mission to serve everyone, that's not technically wrong. So I'm going to give you a hypothetical. The Modern Art Museum exists to provide the highest quality contemporary art to the community. So that's a hypothetical mission statement. There's nothing wrong with that mission statement, but do keep in mind that with a broad mission statement like that, the panel will be checking to make sure that you've thought about diversity and inclusion. So if you're looking at your organization, and I'm going to be blunt here, you see that all leadership positions are homogenous in terms of race and ethnicity or gender, or, particularly, like, I'm going to be blunt, race and ethnicity. And that, over the years, there's been a lot of heightened discussion about race equity in our sector. So if you're looking and you see that the leadership roles are homogenous, but you've got a broad-based mission, and then you look at your board and the board is also homogeneous, you need to tackle this head on in the application. So if you submit an application and you've got this broad mission, your staff is homogeneous, and you answer questions with the statement, we serve everyone, but there's no proof that you serve everyone, then you're going to run into a problem. You may get dinged by the panel. So your best approach, if this describes your organization, is to do this. Tackle this head on, say we are cognizant of the fact that internally we lack diversity. We plan to approach this by doing A, B, C, and D to ensure that we can reach a diverse audience, because very often what can happen is that organizations that lack diversity internally may end up attracting a homogeneous audience internally. So let's say the flip occurs, you've got a broad mission, but you've had some success with diversifying your leadership, but you still see that your audience is pretty homogeneous. You want to tackle that head on and say, we realize that diversifying our audience has been a struggle historically for our organization. So we plan to do A, B, C, and D. And ideally, this would, weave itself into your project description. So let's say the modern art museum that I just described with the broad mission, they again look at the census demographics of Wheaton and see, oh, there's a large Latinx community here. And they do some research on visual artists who, let's say, represent the Dominican diaspora. And they're like, you know what? This is not a demographic that we've been able to reach. So why don't we reach out to these artists who are of Dominican heritage, and we will design a project that is specifically focused on contemporary art that is rooted in Dominican culture. And then they notice that there are some other organizations in the area that have historically been serving the Latinx community. And so they decide to partner with those organizations as well. That's a strong project, right? Because there's a clear target demographic. The applicant is being honest about what they need to work on in terms of community impact, in terms of equity and inclusion. And that's a higher scoring project than an applicant that just says, oh, we serve everyone, and we just want money to present some great modern art. Okay, there are a lot of holes with the first description I gave you, and the panel will notice that and will become concerned. Okay, so I hope that's clear. Admin oversight, I think, is pretty straightforward, which is why I didn't spend a lot of time discussing it. It's basically making sure that your budget is in alignment with the type of project that you've designed. Keep in mind that bigger is not always better, okay? So ideally, your budget is in alignment with the activities you've described in the narrative. So let's say the Modern Art Museum, let's go back to them. So they decide that they want to focus their project. They initially decide that they first thought they would want to, focus specifically on artists of Dominican descent, but then they decided, you know what, actually, I think we should just include just Latinx artists in general. Let's just do the full diaspora. So then they decide that they want to branch out from their actual space, and they want to do a festival. They want to do a festival that's now multidisciplinary. They want to go bigger. And, they say, you know what, we just want a multidisciplinary festival focused on the Latinx community. We'll have visual arts, we'll have performances. We want to book 50 artists. And then the panel looks at the budget and they see that they only have, a $5,000 budget. And the panel's like, well, how are they going to pull this project off if they're presenting 50 artists, but they only have 2 full-time people on staff? And how are they going to equitably pay all these 50 artists if they only have a $5,000 budget? So that's actually not competitive. While, the actual project itself may have heart, what would have been more competitive is the other option, right? So if you're a small organization small number of staff, you know, you only have a $5,000 budget, maybe the original project idea of having one exhibition that features a couple of stellar artists from the Dominican Republic. The exhibition is on view for a couple of weeks. That's more in alignment with a small budget, right? So do keep that in mind, that the panel does not want to see people burned out, which often happens in our sector. You know, we don't want to see staff underpaid, artists underpaid. So if you're concerned about having enough funding to pay staff and artists, it's better to design a small scale project with fewer artists that are paid a decent wage instead of a huge project where artists are basically overworked and underpaid. We don't want to support those situations. So I hope that's clear. And if it's not, feel free to reach out to staff. Okay. So another thing to keep in mind is that we can't provide a grant for a project that scores under 60 points. So sadly, if you know your application is technically eligible in terms of the applicant has met our eligibility requirements and the guidelines, it goes to panel. And if they score you below 60, then sadly, that's an automatic decline. So again, that's why it's important to make sure you start early, ask staff as many questions as you can to make sure that you're not one of those applicants who gets declined with a very low panel score. I will say this, getting a score below 60 is rare for most of our applicants, but again, it has happened. So make sure you're not one of those applicants, start early. All right, in terms of required materials that you need to submit. So we need a full completed narrative. So that means that you need to answer all the questions in the application with a project budget. And we need support materials and work samples. So for individuals, again, this is just for individuals, please upload your resume or CV. You want to include bios of key staff from the partner organization that will help you bring your project into fruition. And then we have letter of support in bold here because again, this is an important document. This is where you can really make a clear case that this is a meaningful collaboration that's been thought out, not something you just threw together quickly. Okay, so spend some time on the letter of support. All right, so for groups, that's entities that do not have 501c3 status, again, not a for-profit. These are groups that operate as a nonprofit but don't have 501c3 status. We need the list of the group members, we need bios, we need a strategic plan if you have it, and an organizational chart if you have it. Folks, bios are important. So, you know, use that as a time to really brag about the qualifications of the people that you're working with. I think that sometimes applicants overlook bios and they don't really make the talents of staff shine. So take a good look at the bios you've written up and make sure that their talents really pop, right, with the project that you've designed. So again, that modern art museum that wants to focus on artists of Dominican descent, they have someone on staff who has a background in working with, you know, artists from the Latinx diaspora. That should be emphasized in that person's bio, right, to connect with the project that you seek funding for. All right, so we also need some financial info from you for groups, the previous fiscal year, end of year revenue and expenses, your current fiscal year operating budget, and a current balance sheet. Sometimes groups struggle with providing all these financial documents, so please reach out to my colleague Karen if you're struggling with what you should provide as a group for financial support material. She's happy to help you out. She does an awesome job describing the financial materials that we need and helping you upload the right documents if you're struggling with how to complete this task. Okay, for organizations, we need your IRS letter of determination. We need a list of board of directors with affiliation. Again, bios are important. Reread those bios to make sure that the talents of your staff really pop. If you have key volunteers that are involved in the project, you should include their bios as well. And again, if you have a strategic plan, please upload it. And if you have an organizational chart, also include that. We also need your FY20 990, 990EZ or 990N. We need a profit and loss balance sheet for the most recently completed fiscal year. And we also need your current operating budget. Okay, programming support materials. So you want to submit one PDF that shows off your qualifications for how you can bring the project into fruition. This can include positive reviews, for past work that you've done, marketing materials such as programming booklets, flyers, examples of previous work that you've completed, whether it be, photos that show the diversity of your audience. Remember, and I'll say this in terms of both programming support materials and work samples, think about quality and not quantity. So it's one PDF, but please don't, jam 20 documents into that one PDF. Remember that the panel has a lot to absorb, and you don't want them to overlook something that's stellar within those 20 documents. So if you have some documents that are like mediocre, some that are stellar, don't throw them all in one PDF. Only choose the ones that you think are of the highest quality, right? Those really stellar reviews, the really creative marketing that you've done, not just some mediocre marketing that you threw together. I mean, you want to think strategically here, because you want to make sure that the panel can absorb everything that you upload. All right, so work samples, which are really important. They, demonstrate your artistic strength or your strength in the humanities. Do remember that if you are a performing arts applicant or a media arts applicant, you should submit video or audio, okay? There's not much that the panel can do with photos. So, if you are applying to receive funding for a, let's say, independent film festival, we need to see short clips of films that you've presented in the recent past. Okay, it should not be a bunch of photos because the panel can't discern the quality of the film if they're just looking at photos. It needs to be actual clips of the films presented. If possible, submit samples that are related to the content of the project that you are asking for financial support for. And you can also include for the panel a description of the type of work samples that you are uploading. That's important. You want to describe carefully why you have chosen specific work samples and how it relates to the project that you are hoping to receive funds for. So we've got some requirements here in terms of what can be uploaded. I'm not going to read all these verbatim because it is in the guidelines, but we do have limits here in terms of the number of work samples you can upload. So images, a maximum of 10 images, no more than 2 videos. You've got a time limit of 5 minutes. So that's, if you submit 2 videos, know that each video shouldn't be 5 minutes. It's 5 minutes combined, okay? And that's because, again, the panel has a lot of information to absorb. They don't have the time, sadly, to look at a 2-hour film, okay? So you wanna think carefully about providing the strongest sample with the limited amount of time panelists have to view it. If you don't have the time to edit the length of a sample, that's okay. You can provide directions for the panel. So let's say you are applying for funds for the Independent Film Festival. You have 2 films that you presented last year and they were incredible, but the films are 2 hours. You can tell the panel to fast forward to a certain time frame and then stop watching at a certain time frame if you are not able to edit the actual sample itself. Just provide clear directions for the panel. Also, too, for written work, let's say you're applying, to support a literary festival, maximum of 10 pages. Please keep in mind that these should be double spaced with at least 11-point font. Please don't submit a work sample that has 8-point font with the narrow margins. Don't do that. It's, the panel won't be able to absorb everything if you try to cram a whole bunch of information in teeny font. So do abide by the directions that we have listed here and in the guidelines. So again, I can't overstate this because it's important. Please think like a curator when you are working on assembling both your supplementary materials and your work samples. More does not automatically mean competitive. You know, an applicant could be more competitive with like 2 stellar work samples as opposed to another applicant that submits, you know, 10 images that are mediocre. Think about quality, not quantity. Staff is happy to help you out here. So if you're having a really hard time picking, feel free to reach out to us and say, you know what, I've got these 5 films and I think they're all fabulous, but I think I should only submit 2. You can describe the films. You can ask us, you know, what do you think? Is it clear how these films align with the project that I'm describing? We're here to help. And I can't overstate this, that there are no stupid questions, in my opinion, and you should never make assumptions. So please, please, please contact us in advance about anything, work samples, supplementary materials, financial uploads, anything. Feel free to reach out. All right, so I'm going to pass the baton over to my colleague, Annalicia, who is going to cover SM Apply.
Thank you, Takenia. Good morning, everyone. My name is Annalicia Fang. I'm the Grants Program Assistant Manager here at the Arts and Humanities Council. And I will be going over our grants portal called SurveyMonkey Apply, or SM Apply for short. So this portal is new as of 2021. Some of you may have used SM Apply with us this year for our spring grants. However, if you are new, I will be going just through a short guide of how to navigate the system. We do recommend that you use Google Chrome for best performance. Google Chrome or Firefox work great. In terms of accessing the actual portal, you can use either of the 2 links on the slide. The first link is the official link. The second link listed is actually for users from our previous portal, Fluid Review. If you're just used to typing in that link, that's okay. You can continue to use that link and it will automatically take you to SM Apply. A different way to access the portal is through our website. So if you go to the Wheaton Cultural Project Grants page on our website and you click on the Applications and Templates tab, there is text in big font that says ready to apply. Click here to access the SM Apply grants portal. And that will take you to the login page for SM Apply. This is what the homepage looks like. It has my contact information as well as my colleague Karen's contact. And then the login or register button are in the upper right-hand corner. So please go ahead and log in to get started. If you are coming from Fluid Review, you can actually just use the same email and password without having to create a new account. If you are completely new to SM Apply, go ahead and click on the register button from a few slides ago. It will give you a form that looks like this. Just enter in all the required fields and click create account at the very bottom of this page. You will get a message saying thank you for registering for SurveyMonkey Apply. We've just sent you an email. In your email, you should receive a message that looks like this. It just says, in order to validate your account, please click on the green confirm email address button below, which will take you back to the site. It'll say, thank you for validating your email address. Click continue to carry on to the site. You will also get a second follow-up email, again, confirming that you validated your email. Why am I going on about validating your email? This is important because if your email is not validated, you actually won't have access to certain features of SM Apply, such as submitting your application. We obviously would not wish that on any of our applicants, so please make sure to follow these instructions so that you're able to fully complete an application and submit it so that it can be evaluated by the panel. Just a few short notes about general account settings before moving on to the application. So all of your account settings can be found in the upper right-hand corner if you click on your name. a drop down will pop up and you can click on My Account to see those settings. There are three setting profiles that you can access. One of them being your profile, which is your name, your email, your time zone. Just make sure that you're in the correct time zone so that the deadlines show up correctly. The second setting would be notifications. Please do not uncheck the first and fourth preferences. We do need to be able to send you messages through the site. We do recommend that you keep all of these preferences checked. However, those middle two are up to you. And the third setting is eligibility, which I will cover in the next few slides. Just know that to access your eligibility settings, again, it's in the upper right-hand corner under My Account. So when you first log in, if you're completely new to SM Apply, you might see a screen that looks like this on the slide. To get started, go ahead and click on the green View Programs button, or you can click on the text that says Programs in the upper right-hand corner, and that will be true for all applicants, whether they are completely new or returning applicants with the SM Apply portal. Again, if you're new to SM Apply, this is where that eligibility profile comes in. It'll prompt you to fill out an eligibility profile. This is not a true eligibility profile. It's more of a guide to show you the most relevant grant opportunities based on your preferences. So the form looks just like this. It basically asks you, are you interested in grants pertaining to individuals, organizations, or groups? It is a select all question, so you could be someone who is an individual artist. However, you're also part of an organization and you will be working on grants for that organization. You could check both those boxes and it will show you grants that are relevant to you as an individual artist and relevant to you as an employee of the organization. And again, you can change your answers to this depending on your situation in the settings. Once you fill out your profile, it will show you the most relevant grant opportunities that are currently open. So when you see the FY22 Wheaton grants opportunity, go ahead and click on the green More button. It'll give you a short overview of the grant as well as the Apply button. So when you click on the green Apply button, it'll ask you to name your application. Please enter in your name as the applicant. So if you're applying as an individual artist or scholar, this would just be your name. If you're applying on behalf of an organization or group, please enter in the name of that organization or group here, and then click the green Create Application button. From there, you will see, this is your submission homepage. So here's where you will see all of the tasks that you have to complete. And actually from here, I'm going to switch to a bit of a live demonstration. So just give me 1 second to switch to the correct screen. Here we are. Before we get started in SurveyMonkey Apply, just one more time, I want to show you where you can find the link on our website. This is our creativemocha.com website. From here, under Find Opportunities, you would go to Grants, scroll until you see the Wheaton Cultural Project Grants opportunity. Click on that header, scroll down, click on Application and Templates in this bar of headers. And here's the text that says, click here to access the SM Apply portal. The link is also available in our guidelines, which you should all definitely read in depth. So in terms of the application in SM Apply, again, this is your submission homepage. I've already completed some of the tasks to speed up this demo. This will be the name of your application. Again, it's the name of the individual artist and scholar or the organization or group. On this left-hand side, you'll see that this will be your name, the person who created the application. You also have the option of adding a collaborator. This could be handy for multiple staff of the same organization who are working on the application, or for individuals if someone from your partner organization needs to upload a document, they might want to be a collaborator. So to add a collaborator, just add in the relevant email addresses, and then you can give them a certain type of access. You can have them view only or view and edit tasks, and you can also write them a welcome message. One thing to keep in mind, as it says here in red text, collaborators will not have access to the submit button. So if a collaborator is doing a last minute edit 2 minutes before the deadline, they're not going to be able to submit. Only the submission owner will have access to the submit button. So please keep that in mind. Another thing to keep in mind, just be cautious about how many collaborators are working in the application at the same time. We want the application to save properly, and we wouldn't wish for any of your work to be resaved on top of each other because you're all working at the same time. So just be conscious of who's working in the system and who's working on what task. When you first start out your application, the only task that you'll see is actually this start here form. I've already filled it out partway, again, just to speed up this demo. But when you click on this start here task, it'll ask you, are you applying to the Wheaton category as an individual artist, an organization, or a group? Your answer to this form will actually determine which tasks are visible to you. So make sure that your answer to this question is firm. I right now have it set for individual artists and scholars, and that's how I will proceed for the rest of this demo. And then make sure to click this green mark as complete button. That is what will show you the relevant tasks. So as you can see, all my tasks are actually visible on this left-hand side. We're going to go ahead and start with the narrative. And as you can see, the narrative, it has a half green circle. That just means that it's in progress. Whereas the start here form that we were just at, it has a green check mark, which means it was fully completed. And the task underneath that says resume or CV, that has a blank circle, which means I have not looked at it. So in this application narrative, we'll ask you to fill out your information, select a discipline. All required questions are marked with an asterisk. So please make sure to fill all of these questions out before moving on to the next page. I'm going to go ahead and click next. Make sure that your answers to these questions are clear. We're still not quite at the evaluative criteria yet, but again, these questions are important to the panel, so please make sure that you write clearly. We will ask you for your grant amount. Make sure that you're within the parameters that Takini spoke about earlier in this presentation. We'll ask you to select a project start date. It has to be in 2022. And an end date, again, in 2022. The project location details, and now we get to go to the evaluative criteria. So these are the evaluative criteria straight from the guidelines. We've pasted them in here for your convenience so that you can keep them in mind as you answer each of these questions. When you do answer these text responses, please note that there is a maximum character count and that this does include spaces. So if I were to write a word and then write in a bunch of spaces, you can see that it's counting those characters. So if you are working in a Word document, make sure that you're keeping track of the character count with spaces. I'm going to go ahead and fill out these text boxes with filler language so that I can go on to the project budget page, which is the last page of the narrative. Please read all of these instructions at the top about the project budget. They really do tell you everything you need to know about how to fill out the charts before and about which expenses or income line items you should include. When you fill out these charts, Remember that for expenses, you must asterisk every line item that will be paid for by the Arts and Humanities Council grant. And in the amount column, make sure that you write just numbers. Please don't include commas or periods or dollar signs, because at the very bottom of this chart, you'll see that it has a total. Oops, let's make that go away. You'll see that it has a total, and other symbols prevent SM Apply from calculating that total. So just keep that in mind. If you have no in kind, feel free to write NA. This is your cash income. The first line item must be the Arts and Humanities Council grant. Again, we said no in kind. And at the very bottom of these charts, we do have totals for your project expenses and income. Please make sure that these match. If they do not, the panel will take notice and they will comment about it during the panel meeting. At the very bottom of the project budget charts, we do have budget notes. This is your chance to give the panel more information about any of the line items. So for example, if you list expenses for materials, here you can break down exactly how you calculated those expenses, where you're getting those materials from, etc. And again, here you can do the same for project income. So if you have a grant from a different organization, you can explain a little bit more about that grant. Again, just putting in some filler language so that I can show you how to finish the narrative. To finish the narrative, you must click this Mark as Complete button. So if you remember at the very top, we have a half green circle. As soon as I click this Mark as Complete button, it should convert to a green circle with a check mark. And it will actually convert the narrative into a PDF, a non-editable PDF. So if you would like to make any changes, make sure you click these three dots in the upper right-hand corner and click edit, and it will take you back to that editor version of the narrative. Moving on to upload tasks. If you see this notification pop up for any of the upload tasks, that just means that you've completed this task in one of our previous applications. So for example, if you applied for an FY22 Artist and Scholar grant, you may have already uploaded a file for this. So you can choose to reuse that file. If you don't want to do that, go ahead and click cancel and upload your new file by just clicking the green attach file button. It'll open your task manager, select the file that you need, and it shows up here at the bottom. You can also click on this blue font that says show accepted formats to see all the different types of file formats that are appropriate for this task. Note that even for upload tasks, you do have to click the Mark as Complete button. So if I were to leave this task and go to the letter of support, again, it's only filled with the half green circle because I didn't mark it as complete. So please mark it as complete. And this is important because you can only submit your application if all required tasks are marked as complete. And again, if you would like to change out the files that you added after marking as complete, click on the three dots in the upper right-hand corner and click edit. And then you'll be able to change out that file. Again, just going to click Mark as Complete. Let's scroll down to the work sample description. This is pretty straightforward. Just make sure that whatever you describe in this box matches the files that you upload. Sounds a little bit silly, but we have had that happen in the past. And down to the work samples, there's one extra feature that you can use in work samples apart from uploading files. You can actually link to a video. So this only works for YouTube and Vimeo videos, but when you click on this, it'll bring up a box Again, it has all the instructions. These are instructions directly from the guidelines. Please pay careful attention to these. And at the bottom, it'll have a space for a link address. You will be required to name your video. And then here is where you can add in that description that Takinia mentioned, where you say, please watch from 55 seconds to 2 minutes 30. When you click OK, your video appears here at the bottom. And at any point, if you want to preview your document, you can click preview. You can exit out of that preview. And if you'd like to preview your video, works the same way. And you can actually play it directly here in SM Apply. So again, I'm just going to mark as complete. And at the very bottom, we have something called HCMC reporting data. This is not in relation to your Wheaton grant. The panel will not be seeing this information. Please fill it out to the best of your ability. And if you have any questions about this, please feel free to contact staff. Again, this is not related to your Wheaton grant. This is information that we need for our own reporting obligations. And the very last task that you have is the checklist and signature. This is, the checklist is more for your own benefit to make sure that you've uploaded or completed all the required tasks. However, more importantly, we do need your signature to be able to view this grant. So you can just left click your mouse, hold and drag it to sign. There we go. If you feel like you messed up your signature, you can click clear and try again. Again, enter your name and date. And at the very bottom, don't forget to click mark as complete. So at this point, if I were to click back to application, this takes me back to the application homepage where I see a full list of all of the tasks. It says I've completed 10 out of 10 required tasks, and I can either review or submit. Both of these buttons ultimately take you to the same place. Review is somewhat nice because you get a nice overview of all of the work that you've done. So you see all your answers to the narrative, and if you continue scrolling, you actually see all of your uploads, all of the documents that you uploaded, even the video that you uploaded, which is really nice. And from here, you can click the green submit your application button. Takinia mentioned this a bit earlier, but you are actually welcome to click the submit button way before the deadline, and then you can go back and edit. And I will show you what that looks like in a second. So when you click the submit button, it'll ask you to confirm that you're ready to submit. Click the submit button in this lower right-hand corner. It'll take you to a screen that says, application submitted, thank you so much. You should receive an email confirmation. If you do not see an email that your application has been received, please reach out to staff immediately and we'll be able to work with you and confirm whether or not we've received it on our end. So let's go back to editing your submission after clicking submit. Let's say you completely forgot to upload a work sample. You would go to my applications in the upper right-hand corner. I have a lot of applications because this is my test account, but most likely you will just have this Wheaton grant. Go ahead and click view. And because the deadline hasn't passed, all of these tasks are completely editable. So let's go to the letter of support. From here, let's say I want to switch out this document. I would click the 3 dots in the upper right, click edit. And from here, I have full ability to remove this document or to add a new document, whatever it is that I want to do. However, I do need to click mark as complete whenever I'm done with any of my edits. So again, this feature is really handy. Takinia mentioned that we can't help you at 12 in the morning, October 16th. Everything does have to be in by October 15th, 11:59. So please, please, please do not be afraid of clicking the submit button. Also keep in mind that all materials must be submitted through SurveyMonkey Apply. We cannot accept any materials through mail or through email. So if you have any tech questions or tech issues, please reach us in time. Please keep in mind that staff are only working regular business hours, so we will only be available until 5:30 p.m. on Friday, October 15th. And with that, I will be switching back to the PowerPoint and turning it back over to Kenia.
All right, thank you so much, Annalicia, for that very helpful SM Apply tutorial. Okay, so if you are one of the lucky applicants that gets approved for an award, keep in mind that we will make award announcements after the board meeting in December of this year, so right before the year ends. The grant awards are dispersed after we've received the items that are listed on the slide. You'll have to sign a grant agreement that will be in SM Apply. For individuals and groups that don't have 501c3 status, you'll have to submit a W-9 form or an employee identification number. We do not mail checks. We have made everything electronic in terms of our offerings to the community, which is particularly important as a safety mechanism during a pandemic. So we will transmit funding directly to your bank account, but you need to set up a bill.com account and fill out a bill.com contact form. You will get instructions on how to do so, how to engage in this process if you receive an award. Annalicia has created a really helpful PDF document that guides you through this process. So know that staff is there to help you if you struggle with setting up a bill.com account, but you have to set up a bill.com account in order to receive your grant. Also too, if you are a returning grantee, please make sure that any reports that are due are in. We can't transmit funding until we have your reports from previous grants. And if you are participating in any of our cooperative marketing initiatives, please make sure that you have paid out any outstanding constituent service fees if applicable. And as I mentioned earlier, sometimes we get late funding from the county. This is not within our control. So keep in mind that we cannot pay you until the county has given us our funding. So that's why I mentioned that if you are setting up a project where you need our money first, then you might want to look at starting a little past January 1st, just to be safe. But I will say this, it's always smart to have some sort of cushioning as you design your budget. Try your best to find other cushioning that can help you, bring the project into fruition in addition to our grant to be safe. All right, so grant writing tips to make sure that you submit as strong of a proposal as possible. Please, please, please do not wait until the last minute to start the application. I know we sound like a broken record. I've stated this, Annalicia has stated this, but it's really important, folks, because there's nothing worse than getting that phone call or that email from someone who missed the deadline and is heartbroken because they designed this amazing project, but they just couldn't finish the application on time. Also, too, we find that, which is logical, rushed applications are usually the least competitive. So let's say you don't miss the deadline, but you're on SM Apply on the day of the deadline, racing against the clock, typing super quickly, just throwing together your answers to the narrative questions, and you just quickly just like pick any work sample and throw it into the application. We really caution you against doing that because this is a competitive funding opportunity, and that, I want to be clear, I don't want these statements to scare you, but the Arts and Humanities Council received a flat appropriation from the county. That means that the amount of funding that will be given to us this year is the same as last year. And what we've seen is an increase in the number of applicants that are applying, which makes sense given that the pandemic has caused a lot of economic strain for our sector in particular, right? So there are a number of individual artists and scholars, a number of nonprofit organizations and groups that could really use the funding. But what happens is that if we experience an increase in the number of applicants and we have flat funding, it naturally makes the opportunity more competitive. So you don't want to put yourself in a position where you don't have enough time to think carefully about designing your project. You want to think carefully about how you're describing the project so that the strengths of the project are clear to the panelists. You want to give yourself time to really, put your best foot forward, which means that you should start early and ask staff any questions you have so that you don't end up throwing something together and then getting declined because we don't have enough money to support all applicants. So do keep this in mind. It's always smart to read project descriptions for grantees that have received awards from us in the recent past. You can find this on our website, and you can actually go pretty far back. We keep a long running list of different fiscal years and the projects that have been awarded, but make sure you at least look at the previous fiscal year, FY21, to see who was awarded in this funding opportunity. You can read the projects and get a real understanding of the diversity of the type of activities that we fund under this funding opportunity. And please read the instructions in SM Apply carefully. Don't hesitate to reach out to Annalisa if you have any questions about SM Apply. And as I said earlier, read the guidelines more than once. There's a lot in there. Make sure you understand the guidelines, and if you don't, please contact staff. Write clearly and concisely, okay? Be careful with acronyms. We see this often when people are rushing. Spell out an acronym at least once, okay? Don't assume that the panelists will understand the acronym if you don't spell it out. Also be careful of jargon, academic jargon, or insider terms. Try to use plain language. Don't assume that, if going back to the example of you're an applicant who has a very specific interest in Colombian folk music, that's great. But if there are certain terms that are specific to Colombian folk music, and you use those terms, please make sure that you define them, right? Don't assume that the applicants will know every specific term that's affiliated with Colombian folk music, right? I think it's always smart to have someone who is unfamiliar with the work that you do proofread your application, okay? Because if it makes sense to them, you're good to go. Now, a reminder that the panel is coming with expertise in the arts and humanities. They'll have a multidisciplinary background, but that doesn't mean that they know all the work your organization does or all the work that you do as an individual. That doesn't mean that they know you specifically, right? So, I think it's really easy for any of us when we're immersed in the day-to-day activities of our work to assume that our descriptions make sense, but they may not. You may have a lot of insider terminology in there, or maybe you're not describing some aspect of the intent of your project clearly, and that's when it really is key, ideally, to have someone who's outside of what you do proofread it for readability. And as we mentioned earlier, take time with your work samples and support materials. We find that very often applicants are surprised by how much time this can take. You want to think carefully. For example, if you're choosing that 2-hour film, you don't have the time to edit it. Please think carefully about which section you want the panel to view. Make sure that your instructions are clear so that they don't get lost in what you're trying to present to them. Be careful about just like submitting a website as a work sample without instruction, meaning like, let's say you're an individual artist and you have your own website, which is great, but don't just send that website. If there's a specific work of art that you want them to see on that website, you have to provide directions for where they can find that specific work of art, okay? And please make sure that you attend the panel meeting. If you are deemed an eligible applicant, please attend the panel meeting. It's a wonderful learning opportunity, and we encourage you to request a feedback appointment regardless of whether or not you get a grant. And other important reminders, the application must be submitted by 11:59 on Friday, October 15th. Do not hit the submit button at 11:58. Please hit it earlier. Don't do that to yourself. We found that with any application portal, this can be true for our portal or any other grant maker's portal, if everyone's trying to hit submit at the same time, the portal can move slower, right? So we don't want all of our grantees trying to hit the submit button at 11:58 at the day of the deadline. You see that little circle spinning on your screen, and then you start to get scared, we can't help you. So if that circle is still spinning and it's October 16th, you're out of luck, okay? So don't fear that submit button, hit it before the deadline, and then you can always get back into your application to make edits as long as the deadline has not passed. Make sure that you have submitted a complete application, right? So look carefully at the list of uploads that you're supposed to submit. And remember, they're different uploads all depending on who you are. So individuals have some uploads that are different than organizations and groups. Please pay careful attention to that and make sure that you've uploaded everything that you need to upload, because the application is supposed to stand on its own by the time the deadline has passed. And a friendly reminder that everything has to be submitted through the SM Apply portal. So that means that you can't email your application. Don't deliver it to our office, okay? We can't, accept those materials. It has to be submitted through SM Apply. And we can't submit we can't accept late applications. This is a non-negotiable rule. The deadline's the deadline. So, just keep that in mind. All right, do remember to sign up for our newsletters. It's a great way to stay on top of all that we offer to the community. So in addition to offering a variety of different funding opportunities, we also have professional development events that are done over Zoom, and we have communal gatherings where you get a chance to network and get to know other people who work in our vibrant cultural sector. Here are the list of helpful staff. So if you have any questions about this funding opportunity, please feel free to start with Ana Alicia and Karen. Ana Alicia, again, is wonderful for any SM Apply questions. Karen in particular is a wonderful resource if you have questions about the financial uploads, but both of them can really answer any questions in general about this funding opportunity. Dorothea is brand new. So, you can include her, but right now, most likely you'll get a response from Ana Alicia and Karen as we are in the midst of training our new grants program coordinator. I'm really, you can include me in the email, but know that there's a higher likelihood you'll get a response from Ana Alicia or Karen, because as the grants director, sometimes I get pulled into other initiatives, other activities that I have to work on with the deputy director and the CEO. So sometimes I'm not available to answer all questions from applicants, but know that one of us will answer you. So, feel free to include all these email addresses and know that someone will get back to you, even if it's not me. Definitely Karen or Ana Alicia will get back to you. And with that, we've got a few minutes for questions. I'm going to take a look at this chat box and see if there are any questions. I don't see any. I'm happy to hear that this is informative. Thank you for your feedback. So I'm going to hang out for a couple of more minutes. I know that sometimes people need a moment to absorb all the info and then type in their questions. But do keep in mind that this is not your only opportunity to ask questions. As we've said earlier, you can reach out to us at any point. Email is probably the best way to start with any questions that you have. So I'll stay here for a couple more minutes and give people time to type in questions if you have them. we will send out the slides. We always make sure that applicants have, access to all the information that we've discussed. We will also at some point have recording of this webinar that sits on our website. So let's say you're working on your application and it's during a time that staff are not available. Maybe you're one of those people who really likes to work on an application at 3 in the morning and you have a question. You can, once the webinar is on our website, just pull up that webinar and fast forward to the section of the webinar that may cover the question you have. Annalicia, in terms of approximate timeline, when do you think you'll be able to get the slides out to attendees?
So slides will be emailed to attendees today, directly after the webinar. In terms of the recording, we do try to get it up within a week or so, but it depends on our capabilities at the moment.
Right. Yeah, we're all juggling multiple funding opportunities, but also keep in mind that, we have another webinar coming up as well for this funding opportunity. It will cover the same content, but know that you can attend as many webinars as you want to. So if you feel like you need to hear this again, feel free to sign up for the next one and you can do that as well. All right, I'm going to stay here for another minute since we have this allocated to last till 12:30. Okay, well, I'm not seeing anything in the chat box, so I just want to thank you all for attending. I know this was a long webinar. Thank you for being patient and staying with us for an hour and a half. I wish you all the best of luck with your submittals. We're always excited to read applications and see work samples and supplementary materials as they come through. So, go for it. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any additional questions. And, we wish you the best of luck. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a lovely day. Take care.